Good morning, everyone. Nice to see everyone joining us this morning on our Thursday morning Mind the Moment gathering, brought to you by Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare and Tufts Health Plan. And this is a place where we invite experienced mindfulness instructors to speak with us about what mindfulness means to them and to process as a community how we can incorporate these practices into our daily lives. I'm Suzanne Rowe Palacino, and I am absolutely delighted to be here again this morning with Rebecca Wing. She's a licensed clinical therapist as well as a mindfulness instructor. So nice to have you back with us again, Rebecca. And just click off your mute there and we'll be ready to roll.
Good to be with you all, everybody. I was here on Tuesday as well this week, so it's nice to be back. If you were here on Tuesday, hi again.
It's great. It's something to consider doing because I love the opportunity to continue conversations from a previous session. So happy to have you back. I think it was a rich discussion we had earlier in the week. So as we usually do, Rebecca will start our session this morning with a question for the group or a thought starter. Yes. And then share some thoughts with us, lead us in a guided practice. And then after that, we'll have time for questions and typing in the chat. So if you can go to the bottom of your screen, as we always guide you to do, if you would like, open up the chat, and then the drop-down menu allows you to look to see everyone's comments as they come in. So you can click on everyone, and that will give you the opportunity to see those comments as they come in. So there we go. Rebecca, how would we like to start this morning?
So in the spirit of inquiry, the question is a sort of a retrieval of a time in your life in the past. So the question is, was there a time in your life where things were going well or things were difficult that evolved over time into something entirely different? And if that was the case, in that change over time from it being either good or not so great, how did it change and what did you learn from it? So that's the question. And it's sort of a reflective question, right? Where in the past did I feel maybe even stuck or that I wanted this thing to go on forever? But in retrospect, looking back at it from now, I can recognize that it evolved and changed into something totally different that I didn't even expect. So that's the question. So as we do the practice today, I want to encourage you once again to experiment with a little insight meditation. So insight meditation is a form of following thoughts that's a little bit different, a little more specific. We're going to be dropping into our breath, as we always do, for our point of focus, for our anchor. But we're also going to be, when we notice that we have a thought arise, experiment with labeling the category of the thought. In other words, saying work, spouse, health. In other words, some category that's broadly explaining the nature or the fundamental nature of the thought itself, and then let the thought go and come back to your breathing. So this is a way of learning not only to notice when a thought arises, but to actually recognize the form of thought that it is: family, work, health, past. You could even name anxious if it's an emotion, right? So experiment with that this morning. So find that place to drop in. As always, helpful to have that spine long and lifted. Even checking in with making sure that your ears are aligned over your shoulders so that the head isn't falling forward or falling backwards. We want that central channel of the body to be lined up from the base of the spine all the way to the top of the head. And then see if you can notice where in the body you might settle a little more. bringing dignity to your posture. And then find that rise and fall of breath, whatever it's doing, we can notice with gentle awareness, coming home to the breath. When the thought arises, label it before letting it go, and then come back home to breath. Notice the wandering. Acknowledge it by naming its category, and come back to that rise and fall. Each thought that arises, we let come and go, like moving in and out of a swinging door. We can categorize the thought, let it go out the door, and come back home to breath. Really drop into that sense of home and the body breathing. As we move towards the end of the practice, drop the form of it entirely. You can give your mind permission to do whatever it wants. And that ultimately, for a few moments, we're simply going to let ourselves rest, just resting. So when you're ready to end the practice, helpful sometimes to draw that deeper breath in, maybe a little stretch this morning as we end the meditation.
Thank you, Rebecca.
You are welcome.
Such a rich subject.
So one of the reasons I brought up the question at the beginning is that we're going to, again, just touch in on equanimity a little bit more like we did on Tuesday. One of the things about equanimity is that as a culture, we don't have much language for it because we don't really talk much about equanimity and what it feels like or what it looks like in American culture, really. I mean, how often do you hear someone say, well, that woman is extremely equanimous? Never. Like, when do you, like, I think I learned the word equanimous even existed just like this year, right? Equanimous, to be equanimous. So the act of equanimity is in part conditioned to the acknowledgement of the arc of time and change. So when you were thinking about what in the past experience did I go through that was one thing while it was happening, but then over time, it actually changed and evolved into something very, very different. When we get more sort of remembering that quality of change over time and recognizing, if you really thought about it, every experience you've ever had in your life has changed into something else. Nothing actually stays the same. And because of that reason, we start to develop this trust in the arc of time that even if I know that I'm going through something that's very painful and very challenging one moment, that in the course of the day, the week, the month, the year, that experience will not stay exactly that way. It will change into something else. And it's very interesting to think about it in terms of even positive things. When you have a real expansive, wonderful experience happen, whether it be for a moment or even for longer, week even, where things are going really great and you're really recognizing it. Equanimity is not about dreading, oh yeah, but this is going to end, it's going to get bad again. It's not really that. It's more than anything appreciating that whatever is happening in this moment, I can experience fully. So let's say it's a positive thing. I can appreciate it and really have a sense of gratitude about it because of its preciousness. Because I know that this baby that I've just had that I'm holding in my arms is going to grow. And this moment of incredible bliss and love that I'm experiencing feels so tender because I now have a deep appreciation of the arc of time and how change happens over time. So these qualities, I think, when you really think about, I'm wondering what those of you who are out there, thinking about this, how does that make time and life in general feel different? When you realize that you can actually have a middle point in this experience of the rise and fall of phenomenon, good things and not good things. So we talk about the seesaw and how sometimes negative things arise and we're not doing well. And then over time, positive thing happens and things are going really, really well. And this back and forth of the duality of life, if we can find that center point, that apex of the seesaw, and hold ourselves and stay more grounded while it's all happening around us, we're less likely to kind of be slammed back and forth in these elevated states of wanting something to stay and feeling sticky around it, or not wanting something and pushing it away because we think it's never going to end. And so this is the wisdom of equanimity. It's one of the biggest sort of conceptual realms in the mindfulness tradition that is helpful to really explore and unpack. Especially, I'll just add this last thing. Think about where you were when the pandemic first started and how you felt. And the scariness and the anxiety and sometimes the depression that would come during that first month of March into April. And think about what your relationship is to that time now because of what you've learned and how you've evolved and how the world has changed since then. So again, something even really horrible, begin to realize, different now. Yeah.
Hmm. I love the way you've described the arc of time.
Yeah.
And that gives someone hope, like someone's mentioned in the chat. Kristen has said, it gives me hope and peace that this too shall pass. And things will be okay. I really like that you've described it that way.
A lot of it has to do with, you can even think of it in terms of movies. Who is the one that always sort of has these words of wisdom? Well, it's always the elder, right? The elder, the one who has lived life and will say all things pass and trust and things will evolve over time. And this is the thing about the aging process. The more you experience in life, the more you realize, oh, wow, lots of change. So I also want to tie that back into meditation practice. So for instance, when I asked you to label the category of the thought that you were noticing during the meditation, you may have had, 5 or 6 different forms of, at one point you're thinking about your husband, and then you're thinking about work, and then you're thinking about the future, and then suddenly you're thinking about your finances. And the recognition is the same. The mental rising and falling of thoughts, again, is ever-changing. And so when you get more clarity about acknowledging, wow, in the course of a 10-minute meditation, I'm thinking about 4 or 5 different categories of things, and that they all come and go. There's a lot of change in the way my brain works. Same process of recognizing, okay, so basically what does that mean? It means that what I'm thinking in any given moment does not stay. And that I can trust again that over time, my thinking will change. So that even if I'm thinking I'm having a really bad day and I'm sort of thinking about how bad it is all day, when you really investigate the nature of the mind. In fact, there are moments during that day where perhaps the cat jumps onto your lap and you're really enjoying the soft fur as you're petting the cat. And you look out the window and you realize, oh, the maple tree that's out there is beautiful, like fall color. So that even in the process of thinking that we're having a hard time, there are these evolutions where, in fact, we're appreciating and dropping into states of okayness. So this is, again, the quality of equanimity, not only within the arc of our personal life, but also in the arc of a moment of time or 5 minutes of time, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I like the categories that you mentioned. I think that was really helpful to me, where I've been part of a labeling process and done that before, but I like how the labeling was just very generic.
Yeah.
For example, you said health versus, rather than worry. It makes it seem separate from us. If someone's worried about, a health condition or something, something they're going to be hearing about potentially, that I've also mentioned to students that you can it's easier to put it on the shelf when you can kind of know that it'll be there at a different time. You can come back to your breath or whatever the anchor is that you use. So yes. I like those categories being very generic. And
yeah, I find, actually, if you, for instance, if you're thinking about your spouse and you say the name of your spouse, it actually can trigger more rumination. Because now I'm really investing in, oh, Joe, and Joe is XYZ, blah, blah, blah. But if I just say husband, it's a broader label that does help us realize that it's not really personal, in a sense that we all have these categories of thought, categories around our health, around our family members, around our work, around our pet. Even if you're thinking about your dog because he's not doing well, pet, right? And this becomes, then we begin to realize that our thinking pattern is really not personal in a lot of ways. It is the way the mechanism of the brain just goes through these different categories of thinking over time. Yeah. So I wonder, for those of you who are out there and thinking about all this, the other part that I just really want to tap into this trust in the arc of time is that oftentimes the takeaway from what was then versus what we have experienced and is different now is that there's a lesson to be learned from our life experiences. So that if you've had an illness, for instance, you had to have surgery, and let's say it was cancer, and you had to have lots of procedures, and you went through it, and it was very painful and very difficult, and you came out the other end of it. It wasn't good. You didn't enjoy it. You felt very sick. Maybe you had chemo and things were not going well. And then now it's 5 years later. And what it was that you had learned and evolved from that experience, which was so painful, oftentimes can be in a deep appreciation of the health you're experiencing now, or a profound understanding of the fact that you're so grateful to still be here to be with your grandchildren, right? Something like that. And so even in the presence of when things aren't going so well, and that seesaw goes back to the negative pole, if we really get better at acknowledging that we can learn from, acknowledge and learn from these things, it can help take the edge off the hardness when it's happening.
Yeah, great practice and great advice. I think there's much for folks to take into the rest of their week. And
sure.
I'm very grateful for you coming and for really bringing this subject along during the week, so that I think folks can really have it resonate with them.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us this morning, Rebecca, and thank you for the community for joining us, and for tapping in and sending your thoughts in as we start to process this very important subject. So, and we will see you next week. Kel Juilliard will be with us next week, so very happy to have him with us. So hopefully you will join us on Tuesday at 8:30. So thanks again, Rebecca, and we'll see you all soon.
My pleasure. Be well.